Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the 40/40 Vision podcast, the ultimate sports history pod where hindsight is 40/40. Before we get started, let's pay some bills and hear from our presenting sponsors.
Every king will be crowned. Trust me. This marathon shit. So let's see who first to the finish. If it's less than 100 racks, it don't deserve your attention.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the 40/40 Vision podcast, the ultimate sports podcast, brought to you by Sideline Sports. I'm your host, Osama and Khaled. Joined with me today is my co-host, Khaled Abdullah. How's it going, man?
Good, man.
Good. So this is episode 5. We're recording it on January 28, 2022. And we're going to cover the top 5 what-if moments in the history of the Buffalo Bills, most recently eliminated from the AFC divisional round. To remind you of the concept of the podcast, the moments we'll be discussing are a 50-50 coin flip situation or decision where you can make an educated guess on what could have been had these situations worked out differently. So far, we've covered a few other NFL teams, the Raiders, the 49ers, and the Cowboys. So now we're doing one of the more tortured franchises, not just in the NFL history, but in sports as well. So we're going to alternate between 5 different moments. They might be some overlap given we're covering the Bills. There might be a couple of moments in common. So I'll let Khaled go, and we'll share our moments. What's your first moment?
Okay. So this is not just, a big-time moment in Buffalo Bills history, one of the big moments in NFL history. And it's a game that is identified by 2 simple words, and that is wide right. So basically, the Bills are, driving late against the New York Giants. They have a chance to win the game. And up steps kicker Scott Norwood, who ends up missing a 47-yard field goal. You guessed it, wide right. So my what if, and I'm sure you're going to add some color and some context to this one, but the question is, what happens if the Bills win Super Bowl 25 in 1990 and that kick does not go wide right? So I'll let you expand on this one a little bit before we dive into the actual what if.
Yeah, so this is arguably the best team, one of the best teams that put together that didn't win a Super Bowl. I mean, they're in the top 3, top 5. You can probably throw the 2007 Patriots in there, 98 Vikings, 68 Baltimore Colts, etc. There's a couple other ones in there. Maybe the Greatest Show on Turf, not going back to back, something like that. So what made this Bills team really special is they developed a no-huddle offense that other teams just couldn't handle. It's not that it's the first ever no-huddle offense, but the way they ran it was unstoppable. The pace was quicker than a typical no-huddle offense. They just exhausted other defenses and they outworked them. They had a really, really good season. You had Jim Kelly. You had Thomas Thurman. It was just a hell of a team.
Yeah, that's a famous K-gun offense.
K-gun, that's right. Yeah. So Bill Parcells' Giants, they constructed the perfect game plan. They wanted to control the clock. So they actually set a Super Bowl record holding possession of the ball for 40 minutes and 33 seconds. So the Giants also overcame a 12-3 second quarter deficit with a 75-yard touchdown drive that took a Super Bowl record of 9.5 minutes off the clock. Did you know about this? That the Belichick and Parcells, just as usual with their clever shenanigans?
Yeah, I was going to say that this sounds awful familiar. It's like the Pats Greatest Show on Turf Super Bowl, like the Pats Rams Super Bowl, the round 2. So yeah, I didn't know about this, but it's a very familiar ploy for these kind of guys.
And the Bills were just better than the Giants, and this was the perfect strategy. And I think the Bills really, in retrospect, have to rue their chances. But the defense can't be the only thing to blame as a result of this kind of clock management strategy. Their clock management on the last drive wasn't great. They moved really slowly on that last play before the field goal. There was this Thurman Thomas run that put them in field goal. I just realized I called him Thomas Thurman earlier. Thurman Thomas run that put them in field goal range. They just took so long to run up and spike the ball. They had 8 seconds left before that 47-yard field goal, and they could have had 10 to 12 seconds left if they just scrambled a little faster. We've seen it happen a couple times in these 2022 playoffs. And that was a fast-paced offense, right? Like, they could have run another play, get that ball closer for Norwood to be in better field position. And to be honest, they could have done that with 8 seconds as well. So I think it was just a missed opportunity to get a little closer. And I get teams weren't breaking off plays, that there wasn't Tyreek Hills and these aliens back then. But I just think that it didn't seem conceivable, perhaps, because on the broadcast, Al Michaels said during the call that they couldn't risk running another play. But I beg to differ. I think they had a shot.
It's a great impression.
That's my Al Michaels. Yeah.
No, that's a great point, and it's the little things, right? It's always the execution. I mean, they probably weren't ready for a dogfight the way that the Giants did it. Like you said in the past, Bill Parcells teams, Bill Belichick teams, they muck things up and they make it ugly. And when you're a K-gun, run and shoot spread offense, you're not, prepared for the muck. You want the Autobahn, not the muck.
Yeah, I agree. It became their legacy, right? Parcells and Belichick, and they really love that AFC, that East and NFC East conference. So my what if for this is, if it's just a slight difference in execution. If they just get a couple more seconds back, they run a quick out route to Lofton. Maybe Norwood gets a 41-yard field goal instead of a 47-yarder, and he buries it. And I think that's the only way they win. They were good enough to get to the Super Bowl the other 3 years, but the teams they faced afterwards just totally outplayed them, Washington and Dallas. So this game was the one true opportunity they had. And this is the one heartbreak of all of those 4 heartbreaks. So winning this game would be the consolation, even if they did go 4 years in a row.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you ask any Bills fan, would you trade, 10 Super Bowl appearances for that victory? I think they would take it. And, from what they've said after, Steve Tasker, the famous special teams guy on these Bills teams, he basically said, if they had won that Super Bowl, and a lot of people say that, is they probably wouldn't have made it back for the next 3 years. Maybe they make it back one of those next 3 years because they're such a talented team, but the fight wasn't there or wouldn't have been there. So Tasker said after the next year, they were in a dogfight with the Denver Broncos in the AFC Championship game, and they kind of gritted their teeth and fought through it because they were so motivated by the heartbreak of the season before. So if they win that first Super Bowl in 1990, there's a good chance they don't make the next 3. That's a pretty safe bet, I think. So clear what if they win Super Bowl 25, they don't make the next 3, which is a trade, like we said, the Bills fans would gladly make.
Absolutely. Cool. Do you have anything else on this one?
No, just it's one of many heartbreaks for this team. I mean, the next 3 Super Bowls were dominated pretty handily by the team. So this was by far their best chance. And the chance went wide right.
Yeah. So let me transition to well, that was my number 1. So we both had the same number 1, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So my number 2 is the Music City Miracle. And I think we have different what ifs for this one. So my what if question is, what if Wade Phillips wasn't a coward? And there and I have a reason for this, and I think I have a good reason for this.
Yeah, I didn't think this was fair until I looked into it. So yeah, go on.
So this game is, if you're a Titans fan, 100% a miracle. There's some Bills fans I went to college with. You bring up this game, they just start mother bleeping everything when you talk about this game. They score at the end of the game to go up one. They kick a field goal, and they kick it off to the new Tennessee Titans, formerly of the Houston Oilers. And then they run this. Well, I'll let you explain the play. You actually explain it better.
The actual play itself, the Music City
next?
Miracle,
Yeah.
aka the home run throwback. Tennessee is trailing 16-15 after a 41-yard field goal by Steve Christie. 16 seconds left, and we'll get into why there was 16 seconds left. Lorenzo Neal takes the recovers a kick, laterals it to Frank Wycheck, who throws it to Kevin Dyson across the field in one of the most controversial plays in NFL history. Was it a forward pass? Was it not? Dyson runs 75 yards, scores a touchdown, and it's game over. So that's the Music City Miracle in Tennessee, and it's I don't know if they have a word for it in Buffalo, but the play was called the home run throwback. So, but yeah, let's get into why there were 16 seconds left in that game.
Yeah. So, and this goes to my what if about Wade Phillips. So, without much time left in the game, the Bills kick a field goal to go up by one. This is fine. It's fine to kick a field goal at the end of a game and go up by one with 16 seconds left. The problem that I have with this decision is that it was first down. There was time on the clock. There was plenty of time on the clock to do something else, run a play, take a knee and clock it. They didn't do any of that. They
had no timeouts, just to be clear. Buffalo had no more timeouts.
That's fine. There are still ways to stop the clock without calling a timeout if you don't have any. So for me, this is really straightforward.
Yeah, and it's almost standard practice now. You see teams do this all the time. I mean, just this year alone, I remember the Raiders doing it a couple times where they would kneel, do whatever, clock it, and then kick, like you said, with time expiring. So maybe it wasn't standard practice 20 years ago, but it is now.
Yeah, it's criminal. It's egregious. It's cowardly. It's so many things. So my what if is really simple. They take a goddamn knee, they clock it, and then they kick it with time expiring, and they win the game. And there is no miracle play that on a kickoff return. There leaves no shot. They just win the game because they don't leave it to chance. So if Wade Phillips wasn't a coward, the Bills would have won this game.
Yeah, I think they might have had to take two knees because Tennessee had 2 timeouts left, I think, at this time, but the point still stands. Run two quarterback kneels and you spike it and it's game over. Well, you kick it and it's game over. And they had a reliable kicker, and it would have been a 42 instead of a 41-yard field goal, so a marginal difference. But yeah, so your what if Wade Phillips wasn't a coward during the Music City Miracle game, and mine, I guess, is kind of related to that. Because it's what if Doug Flutie started the famous Music City Miracle game instead of Rob Johnson? So just some quick background here is in week 17 of that year, the Bills played the Colts. The Bills had already locked up their playoff spot. They couldn't move up or down. So they started backup Rob Johnson. So Rob Johnson and Doug Flutie, went back and forth. They were a big QB controversy. Rob Johnson and the backups wax Indianapolis, 31-7, something like that. And the owner tells Wade Phillips, you're going to start Rob Johnson in the playoffs, even though Doug Flutie was the starter all year and had led Buffalo to a 10-5 record, as a starter. So it was a direction from management. So the question is, if Flutie starts this game, who had a pretty good year, who was, a better quarterback than Rob Johnson, does this play even happen? Does Buffalo, wax Tennessee? Do they win this game? And it's really unfortunate that this game came down to this play most likely because, a backup won week 17 and the owner made the wrong decision. So yeah, maybe if Wade Phillips wasn't a coward and stood up to Ralph Wilson, they would have won this game too.
So the theme seems to be Wade Phillips is a coward.
Yeah, unfortunately. And this was also like the last gasp game for a lot of the veterans from the Super Bowl team, like Andre Reed, Bruce Smith, and Thurman Thomas were still on this team. And they said that they thought that they had a Super Bowl caliber team. I mean, both them and Tennessee were the wild card team, so it was impressive that Tennessee ended up making the Super Bowl that year. They lost that famous game against the Rams. But yeah, maybe Buffalo makes it to the Super Bowl. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, if only Wade Phillips.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my number 3, but anything else on this game?
No, I was young at the time. I watched this game, but it was so long ago. I just don't remember. I remember the last play. I don't remember the timeouts, and that's kind of why we call it 40-40 vision, right? Is everything? It's when you look back in hindsight, it's 2020, and
well, it's 40-40.
Excuse me, 40-40. I don't remember the timeout, the no timeouts, and the field goal and first down.
You remember like the broad strokes, but the details, that's a tough one. So
yeah. All right. So let me turn it over to you then, because that was my number 2. So what do you have next?
So yeah, the Music City Miracle for me was number 4, but my number 2 is what if the Bills pay O.J. Simpson instead of trading? I see you laughing. I know. This is the second time in 5 episodes that I've brought up O.J. Simpson. And the first time was on the San Francisco podcast, where basically the failure of trading 1 million picks for O.J. leads to the Bill Walsh era. So the successful move of trading away an aging O.J. Simpson ends up being one of the catalysts to the Super Bowl. I don't want to say dynasty, but the AFC dynasty in the early 90s. So I'll try to breeze through this, but follow me on this, right? So in the late 70s, the Bills hire a new head coach by the name of Chuck Knox, and he wanted to basically initiate a rebuild. And he decided, I'm going to trade away, my formerly great running back O.J. Simpson to San Francisco 49ers, who were a willing customer. So O.J. goes back home. The Bills end up getting 5 picks, including, because the Niners ended up sucking, the 1979 first overall pick. They draft a linebacker by the name of Tom Cousineau. And the reason he's important is because this gentleman chooses not to play for the Bills. He's like, you're not offering me enough money. There was a situation where he flew out to Buffalo after the draft and they didn't take him out to dinner. Just crazy things that just wouldn't happen in this era of the NFL. But he goes to the CFL. He plays for a couple years there. He wins a Grey Cup MVP. So he's obviously a great player. He gets hurt, tries to come back to the NFL, but not to the Buffalo Bills, of course. The Oilers make an offer for him. Buffalo matches the offer. And then the Cleveland Browns come in. The Cleveland Browns come. They make an offer to Cousineau. Cousineau accepts. And they end up sending 3 draft picks over the next 3 seasons, a first, a second, and a third. So they turned O.J. Simpson into 8 draft picks. And the reason this is important is because Cleveland's first rounder in the 1983 NFL draft was the 14th pick, and they ended up choosing Jim Kelly from the University of Miami. So it's a pretty clear what if. You can draw that line from OJ. The butterfly effect of O.J. Simpson is if they don't trade OJ, they don't get Jim Kelly. They don't take him with the 14th pick, and that means no Super Bowl appearances, no mid 90s AFC or early 90s AFC dynasty. So you're gonna say your famous line?
Which famous line?
Thanks, OJ.
Oh my God, no! Thanks, OJ. Phrasing.
Yeah. So
yeah, I get what you mean. The Niners legacy, the run that they had in the 80s, the golden era with Bill Walsh, is a result of O.J. Simpson being traded there.
a direct result.
Yeah, a direct result.
He sucked so bad he got everybody fired.
Yeah, I mean it was management malpractice.
And it's just so funny, like reading back these old stories of, it's just like a lack of professionalism of this. Your first overall pick like comes to town and you stand him up at his hotel and he gets mad and says, you know what, I'm going to go play in Canada. It's just so funny to think like, we think of the NFL as like, it's obviously now it's this multi-billion-dollar organization. It's all, super professional, but I think back then it was still more of like a mom and pop organization. Like it operated probably more like The Office than like, a global conglomerate. So I love these kind of stories. But yeah, so no OJ trade, no Jim Kelly, no Super Bowls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And this is an interesting what if, because a lot of the times when you have a franchise like Buffalo, your what ifs are usually centered around some sort of heartbreak, but this is more so of a pivotal moment in franchise history that set up a lot of some of the success that they saw. Although they came up short, a lot of it was made possible because of this.
Yeah, and there I have another one like that coming up, but I'll pass it back to you for your number 3.
Yeah, so my number 3 is very, very recently. We just saw it less than a week ago, and it's what if the Bills stopped the Chiefs in those last 13 seconds?
Brutal.
Yeah, it's tough, right? 2 words. Is wide right and 13 seconds are both 2 tough, short ways to describe tough losses.
This is a theme for the Bills. It's wide right, Music City Miracle, 13 seconds.
Yeah, it's not. It's tough. It's really tough. This was obviously the most entertaining game you'll ever see. It's hard for football to get better than this. But if you're a Bills fan, it must have been hearts and mouths trying to watch this because of what was at stake, to a spot in the AFC Championship game. And it's tough that these two teams met, right? You had some notes on how this even came to be.
Yeah, they basically happened because they both lost to I don't want to say subpar Tennessee team, but a Tennessee team that was hobbled. And the Bills lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was a final score like 9-6. And you don't think about things like this when they happen. Maybe you did at the time, but if they were an 11-win team and they were, I think, 0-5 in 1-score games. So every loss was a 1-score game. So if any of those 1-score games go the other way, it's very possible, or it's guaranteed that they would have hosted this game, or they host Cincinnati in the first round, after a bye, or in the second round after a bye. So there's just any number of ways that this could have gone differently, and we would have gotten Chiefs Bills in the AFC Championship game, or Chiefs Bills in Orchard Park instead of Arrowhead. So thanks Jacksonville, I guess.
Yeah, or the Bills, right? The Bills shouldn't have lost that game. Come on. They lost to Urban Meyer. That's who they lost to, Urban Meyer and his attitude that spent the season calling everyone a loser in his path. What's tough about this loss is the Bills lost to the Chiefs the previous season in the AFC Championship game, and it was a blowout. This is an even better Buffalo team than last year, and probably the best Buffalo team in a really long time. And there's going to be a lot of shaking up after this. They're going to lose their offensive coordinators, some key front office personnel. Emmanuel Sanders is a free agent. Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison. They're going to have to renew Devin Singletary and Dawson Knox and Cole Beasley next year. Stephon Diggs has 2 years left. Their center Mitch Morse, and free safety Jordan Poyer is coming up too. So this season had a lot of solid pieces in place that are up in the air. over the next 2 or 3 seasons that they'll need to address. And this is a salary cap sport, so it's unlikely for everyone to stay. And Josh Allen has such a huge contract. So that's what's going to make the aftermath of this tough. But back to what actually happened, because I don't think we touched on that yet. This might be too fresh, but it's important to note. But last 2 minutes, 25 points are scored between these two teams. Bills score and a 2-point conversion.
I've actually I could do a quick recap just to refresh our memory, because it was like a tennis game. Like you're just turning your head as the swing of the racket. So basically the game really picked up with about 9 minutes left in the fourth. The Chiefs fail on a 3rd and 1 deep in Buffalo territory, kick a field goal to go up 26-21. So perhaps if the Chiefs score a touchdown on that drive, none of this happens because they go up by 9. Anyway, Buffalo gets the ball back. They go on a long drive. They score on a 4th and 13 with 2 minutes left, and they get the 2-point conversion to go up 29-26. KC responds in 5 plays in 1 minute. So Tyreek Hill scores on a 64-yard touchdown to go up 33-29. So KC's up 4. The Bills respond just as quickly. They score in 45 seconds and 6 plays to go back up 36-33. And they leave 13 seconds left on the clock. KC responds. They go 44 yards in 2 plays and only take 10 seconds off the clock because they had all 3 timeouts. They kick the field goal, tie the game, goes to overtime. KC wins the toss, score a touchdown in 8 plays, and they win 42-36. So Josh Allen doesn't get to see the ball after what he thinks is the go-ahead touchdown with 13 seconds left. And instead of going to the AFC Championship, he went home. So
incredible. It's incredible. It was the most thrilling 2 minutes of football you'll ever see before that overtime where Kansas City just did their thing. And by that point, like, Buffalo is exhausted. It's cold. They're away. Both teams are exhausted. Like, defense was out the window in a game like this. This was the opposite of the game at Lambeau, where it was too cold, where this was pretty cold, but these teams were still shredding each other.
Yeah. And interesting little nugget here is apparently Tyler Bass, the kicker, missed the squib kick call. So a lot of people were shredding him for the team for not kicking, doing a squib kick with 13 seconds left, which would have probably taken at least 5-6 seconds off the clock. But apparently he missed the call because he was kicking into a net, on the sideline. So a lot of strange circumstances. Maybe it's too loud in there. They couldn't communicate. Maybe that's what happens when you're on the road. I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have happened if they were at home. So yeah, it's always the little things. It's the details that cause these big picture impacts.
That's insane. I did not know that. That's why. Yeah, this all just happened this game a week ago. So that I did not know. That is fascinating. And wow. Okay. That doesn't change my what if, I suppose.
Yeah.
We'll just, because, I guess you could tie it in. I'll do a double what if here. So initially I was thinking about what happened during the game. And I mean, both teams had their chances. Stephon Diggs could have been more involved. The beginning of the game, these teams were very methodical. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes kind of using their legs to create plays. So defense stood no chance against this kind of elite playmaking. So it has to come down to this last 13 seconds, because everything else was too much. These quarterbacks controlled the day. Let's say it's 2. If Tyler Bass gets the squib kick right, there's just no way in hell. Okay, I don't care. It's not happening with like 5 seconds left. It's not.
The chances are dramatically reduced. We'll say that.
Yeah, they're even significantly less. We're not calling Music City Miracles or anything like that. We're not calling it 5 seconds. It's not going down from 13 to 5, and that's the new infamous play. If Tyler Bass gets the squib kick call, the Bills win this game. The other what if is just somehow Patrick Mahomes throws an incomplete pass. They get a stop on this during these 13 seconds. Maybe the Harrison Butker misses the field goal. Just not 40 yards in 8 seconds and somehow miraculously kicking the field goal. Just anything besides that is the other what if.
Yeah, and I believe it was a 47-yard kick, and he had missed one earlier in the game. I think he also missed an extra point. So it definitely wasn't a gimme. So it's very possible that, or sorry, it was a 49-yard field goal. So 50 yards almost in the freezing cold. So he gets a lot of credit for that. But yeah, he very easily could have missed that kick. And of course, Buffalo wins that game. So that's I guess a third what if in that situation.
Yeah. So where do you have them if they pull this off and they were so close? What happens here? They play the Bengals they would have played the Bengals in a few days instead of the Chiefs. What do you think happens next?
So we obviously can't say for sure, if they would have won the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. But what we can say for sure is that they would have been favored against the Bengals probably by maybe 10 points, especially at home, or at least a touchdown. And they definitely would have been favored over both the Rams and the 49ers, who are both, flawed teams in their own way. And then we would have gotten to see Josh Allen in a Super Bowl in a dome, where this this track team of a football squad would have been running all over the place. So, it's not like KC is a slouch if they make the Super Bowl or anybody on the NFC, but we were definitely robbed of seeing, like you said, probably the best Buffalo team that we've had in a long time make a Super Bowl. So,
and shortly before recording, the offensive coordinator was hired as the head coach of the New York Giants, Brian Daboll.
Yeah. So they're getting, picked apart for their success. So it's going to be hard to come back. I mean, maybe this is the passing of the torch, so to speak. They say Pat Mahomes lost to Tom Brady a couple years back in overtime. He didn't get to touch the ball, came back and won a Super Bowl. Maybe it's Josh Allen's turn. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, just because they are shaking things up, it doesn't mean that they won't come back really solid next year, just because we expect Josh Allen to take another leap. But this was definitely a hell of a team and a hell of a shot. That was just so close.
Okay. So
right.
I had that one at my number 5. So I know you had a little bit higher, but I still had it on my list, even though, like you said, it just happened a week ago. So
I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. So this is another one, a little way back in the time machine. So it's tied to our number 2. So my number 2 was, the Bills traded OJ and they end up drafting Jim Kelly with the picks that came as a result. So unfortunately, when they drafted Jim Kelly, he didn't want to play for them either, just like Greg Cousineau. He ends up going to the USFL. He plays with the Houston Gamblers because he's a Pennsylvania guy, but he played his college football in Miami, and he just didn't want to play in the cold. So it's a familiar complaint about guys playing with Buffalo. But he absolutely lights it up in the USFL. And he probably would have stayed there for a long time, but the league folded and Buffalo still had his rights. So what ends up happening is during the 3 years that they still had Jim Kelly's rights, but he was, playing in the USFL, that the Bills were terrible. They go 2-14 in 83 and 84, and they go 4-12 in 85. And because they were so bad, they were essentially tanking while also having a Hall of Fame quarterback on the books. And they were able to draft guys like Bruce Smith with the number 1 overall pick, Frank Reich, who was a big player during this time, backup quarterback, greatest comeback in NFL history. They drafted Andre Reed, a Hall of Famer. They also draft 2 great players on defense in Shane Conlon and Nate Odom. So basically, the fact that Jim Kelly snubbed this team ended up being a huge blessing in disguise because they were able to stockpile all these picks and draft all these great players. And basically, if Jim Kelly doesn't snub them, they don't make all these Super Bowls because ostensibly they're going to be a better team, and they don't, they can't tank and draft. Well, they definitely don't draft Bruce Smith number 1 because they're a better team than that. So, basically, if my what if is if Jim Kelly doesn't snub the Bills, we don't get these 4 heartbreaks, but we also probably don't get these that dynasty team. So
This is a really good one because it was. I remember watching the 30 for 30 episode on Buffalo and how
the four falls of Buffalo.
4 Falls of Buffalo. Yeah, really good one. And I remember Jim Kelly snubbing them and found that to be peculiar. And we've seen quarterbacks do this throughout history. I'm just not playing there. I think he was one of few, though, that actually did end up, after saying that initially, playing for the team that drafted him. I think John Elway, a couple other guys, said they didn't want to play for certain teams and then didn't. But he actually
Eli Manning.
Yeah, Eli Manning. He actually did come back to Buffalo. So that part is interesting.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I'm sure the Bills fans and the Bills front office probably tearing their hair out at yet another top pick, snubbing them. But it worked out really well. I mean, Bill Polian was he's the GM at the time. He was the architect of these teams, and he was able to capitalize on all these high draft picks just because Jim Kelly said, I'm not playing for you guys.
Yeah, Bill Polian built a hell of a resume as a result too, right? 6-time executive of the year, Peyton Manning, etc. So
yeah, I mean, if you look at his track record those years, it's remarkable. The number of Hall of Famers and just incredible players that he drafted over that time. He definitely earned those awards.
Yeah, this is a really good one because, again, it takes a mistake or some sort of, what was a negative at the time into a positive, and how if that seemingly didn't happen, we don't have the run. So it's two different players that didn't want to play for the Bills end up causing a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, and then you could argue it was 3 because OJ didn't want to play there either, and he wanted a massive contract. He wasn't happy with the front office. But yeah, it's not all heartbreak in Buffalo,
Right.
Clouds with some silver linings here on their dark cloud.
Yeah. I don't have anything else for this. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, it's all back to you.
Cool. So my number 4 looks at the management of the Buffalo Bills from 2000 up through the sale of the team in 2014. So my what if the hunt for a quarterback went a different way. So they had Doug Flutie, who we mentioned in the infamous Music City Miracle game. In the following season, in the 2000 draft, they draft one of the bigger busts in Buffalo Bills history, Eric Flowers, in the first round. Different Eric Flowers is one that plays now. At the 26th overall pick, only played 2 years for Buffalo, and maybe a couple. They drafted a couple of other players in that 2000 draft. In the 2000 draft, we bring up a lot on this podcast because Tom Brady was drafted in the 2000 drafts, and there's almost a what if for Tom Brady for every team because everyone
literally, yeah,
to some degree passed on Tom Brady, right? He's been playing for over 20 years. So what I'm getting at here is we talked about this with the Cowboys, is kind of a lack of a succession plan. Like they have Doug Flutie. They play Rob Johnson in that Music City Miracle game, and he wasn't good. You just mentioned a bunch of great points as to why Doug Flutie would have been a better option. And the quarterback position is just so important. And you have all of these general managers all trying to outsmart the other and build these teams. And I can understand not drafting Tom Brady because he went so late. No one saw this coming. But the Bills still saw something in Flutie and Johnson. But at this point, it feels like they already knew who Rob Johnson was. He wasn't it. So kind of like with the Cowboys and Troy Aikman, how they didn't have a succession plan. Neither did the Bills. A couple of years after this, they went with 30-year-old Drew Bledsoe after Tom Brady kicked him out of town, essentially. And in those seasons with Drew Bledsoe, they went 8 for 8, 6 and 10, and 9 and 7. So That
So
didn't
very
work.
average.
Very average. I mean, he had his run, but he was not the same guy by this time. And this kind of runs with a trend of them running through a bunch of front office executives over the next decade before the team was sold in 2014 to the current owner, Terry Pagula. So they go 18 years without another playoff appearance. They finally broke the drought under, I don't remember if it was Rex Ryan or Sean McDonough in 2017. It was Tyrod Taylor starting for quarterback. That was one of the longest droughts in sports. Was broken when they made the playoffs. I think they lost in the wild card game to a Jacksonville team with the number one defense in football that year.
That was in 2017.
Yep.
Under Sean McDermott. So I believe it was Sean McDermott's first year.
Okay, so Sean McDermott is the core competency here. So the what if is kind of just if the team was managed differently, because they went through 4 or 5 different general managers throughout that time trying to piece together a team, and ended up resulting in the sale of the team because nothing was going right. So this might be maybe if you're a Bills fan, this is all very self-aware, but I feel like this is a part of Bills history. Unless you really look into it, you miss that not only did after the Music City Miracle, everything fell apart, and there just was there was a lot of mismanagement for almost 20 years after that.
Yeah, and they in the years between the Jim Kelly era and the Josh Allen era, the Bills had almost 20 starting quarterbacks. So that's not a great sign. Obviously, it's 20 years almost from 96 to 2018 when they drafted Josh Allen. So over 20 years, and they had about 20 starting quarterbacks. And it wasn't for a lack of trying. They definitely tried to replace Jim Kelly. They used a first-round pick on J.P. Lossman. They drafted Trent Edwards, I think, in the 3rd round. They drafted E.J. Manuel in the 1st round. So it wasn't, like I said, for a lack of trying, but it just goes to show you that, without a clear organizational plan, if you're shuffling GMs and execs every year, there's no identity to the team. And, guys are maybe taking big swings or reaching on players that weren't 1st-round caliber and hitching their wagon to quarterbacks that just weren't good enough. And now with Josh Allen, they obviously have a quarterback that's good enough to take him to the promised land. And that has come as a result of some organizational stability, some stability at head coach. So, it's a chicken or the egg situation that the quarterback could breed that stability, but it's such a situation dependent position that without that organizational stability, more often than not, your quarterbacks are going to fail.
Yep. 100%. So I think it's, and you can see it in the amount of turnover they had in the front office that this was a problem. So
yeah, it's a very common theme with struggling NFL teams, especially in this past this millennium, the Raiders, the Browns, the Bills for a long time, et cetera. If you got double-digit starting quarterbacks, you're not in good shape. So
credit to them for getting frustrated and shaking things up and adapting to change after just a few years with new ownership. So I think things will be different for Buffalo for a while now that they have gotten things right.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll pass it back over to you.
Yeah. So we covered my number 4 earlier was the Music City Miracle. I think we covered that game pretty well. And then, of course, or my number 5 was the 13 seconds game. So we talked about that as well. And kind of the legend that's growing around Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes. And hopefully we get to see a lot more of those battles. So, yeah, we covered all 5 of mine. And I think you have one more.
All right. There's a lot of overlap. I just this one isn't too complicated. It kind of relates a bit to my number 4 with the quarterback hunt and trying to the kind of the mismanagement of the organization. This one is very specific though, and it's what if the Bills drafted Aaron Rodgers instead of trading up their pick in advance and drafting J.P. Lossman. So I think they missed 2 quarterbacks here. They actually miss on Ben Roethlisberger and Aaron Rodgers. and they traded their pick to Dallas for the 2005 first round pick. And Dallas drafts Marcus Spears, which is fine. He was a good player. But they were initially trying to get Ben Roethlisberger, who ends up going way earlier than their pick. I believe they picked Lossman at, like Roethlisberger was drafted at 11. Lossman was drafted at 22nd. So it was a missed opportunity, and it sounds like a miscalculation in where they thought Roethlisberger would end up. Maybe they tried another trade to get further up. Is that what happened? They missed.
From what I read, they were trying to trade into the top 10. So once Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers were off the board, they were trying to trade with Houston, who had David Carr at the time, and they were trying to trade up to the 10th spot to draft Roethlisberger, but obviously we're not able to do so. And then he goes the following pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I think David Carr just got sacked after you said his name.
It's like an angel getting its wings every time a bell rings.
Yeah, if you say his name 3 times in the mirror, he gets sacked wherever he's at. So they miss out on Ben. They couldn't get the trade right. So they still end up trading. And who knows if they knew whether or not he would be on their draft board by that time. It's that I don't know. That information wasn't available. So they get J.P. Lossman. I remember J.P. Lossman when I was in high school. He had 1 year where he was dropping bombs to Lee Evans, but they ended up coining him the term Loss Man. The coaching staff never really trusted him. He was benched twice in favor of aging veteran Kelly Holcomb. And then they drafted Trent Edwards as a rookie shortly after. So he's a really high draft bust because in relation to the quarterback position, they traded up to get him. They ended up trading away what would be the 20th overall pick in the 2005 draft to Dallas. And sitting there at number 20 the following year was Aaron Rodgers. So my what if is, if you're not going to get into the top 10 like you initially were going to, keep your pick and be a little more competent in the following year. You get Aaron Rodgers, and you don't have this 18-year drought picking different quarterbacks and seeing what sticks and what doesn't. So I think that they had a legit missed opportunity because they got some sort of FOMO, some sort of fear of missing out, or they felt like they had to still trade up into that draft even though they didn't get the slot they wanted.
Yeah, it's rare that the third or fourth best quarterback in the draft, or the third or fourth selected quarterback in the draft is the best one. So like you said, they got FOMO. They reached perhaps for J.P. Lossman. His career gets off to a rocky start, and he breaks his leg in rookie training camp. So he's obviously not able to beat out Drew Bledsoe. And then his career kind of spirals from there. Like you said, he has that one good year in 2006, but he only lasts in Buffalo for 5 years, but he doesn't start that many games. Like you said, he keeps getting benched for Kelly Holcomb and other quarterbacks that also aren't very good. So it's unfortunate for him. It's unfortunate for Buffalo, because if they kept their pick, they could have picked Aaron Rodgers the next year. So,
yep. Well, that's all I had. Did you have any honorable mentions?
I did. I feel like I'm the honorable mention guy. I need you to come up with some too. So I'm not the only one talking. But I have two. The first one is, what if Josh Allen went to the Cleveland Browns? So in that draft, that 2018 draft, there was, I think, 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round. It was Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, obviously, and Lamar Jackson. But the reports leading up to the draft were that the Browns really liked Josh Allen. They also liked Sam Darnold. But a lot of people expected Josh Allen to be the number 1 pick, but perhaps it was his small school pedigree, his kind of unorthodox play style. But he ends up falling to Buffalo, and the Cleveland Browns take Baker Mayfield. So maybe it would have been the Browns in the AFC divisional game going toe-to-toe with Pat Mahomes if they drafted him instead. And my second honorable mention is way, way, way back. So this is Ralph Wilson, the original owner and founder of the Bills, was a part owner of the Detroit Lions, but he wanted to buy into the AFL. And he very nearly started an AFL team in Miami and not in Buffalo. So he was going to put a team there, but there was some issue with them not having a stadium. So they would have had to use the Orange Bowl, which the University of Miami plays in. But at that time, for whatever reason, NFL or pro teams weren't allowed to use college stadiums. So he had to look elsewhere, and he ends up landing in Buffalo. So I can't think of a more different place to Miami than Buffalo, New York. But that's where he decided to plant his flag.
Huh. Interesting. A very close call.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe he would have been the owner of the soon-to-be Miami Dolphins. Who knows? Maybe we don't get a franchise in Buffalo. So,
don't say that. There's Buffalo Bills fans listening.
Well, good for Ralph Wilson for not being scared of a little snow.
Yeah,
starting this team.
Cool. That's a good one. Those are interesting honorable mentions. Let's go ahead and recap our list. I'll let you go ahead and go first.
Okay, so my number one is what if the Bills won Super Bowl 25, the famous wide right game? Number two, what if the Bills pay O.J. Simpson instead of trading him to the San Francisco 49ers? What if Jim Kelly doesn't snub the Bills for a few years in the mid-'80s? Number four, what if Doug Flutie starts the famous Music City Miracle game ahead of Rob Johnson? And my number five is what if the Bills won the famous 13 seconds game, or the infamous, I guess, for Bills fans.
Cool. My list, my number one is also what if the Buffalo Bills won the wide right Super Bowl. My number two is the Music City Miracle. What if Wade Phillips wasn't a coward? My number three is what if they won the 13 seconds AFC division playoff game against the Chiefs. My number four is what if the hunt for a quarterback and management went a different way for pretty much throughout the 2000s. And my number five was what if they drafted Aaron Rodgers instead of J.P. Lossman.
So a lot of heartbreak. This is kind of what the Bills are known for, but it wasn't all heartbreak. It's obviously unfortunate that they weren't able to win those Super Bowls, but they got there. That's got to mean something, right? Is the AFC championships some kind of consolation, I guess.
Well, my question is, and I should have looked into this, is do you have Bills Mafia and the jumping through tables as a result? Was this a tradition that goes back that far, or did they start jumping through tables as a result of heartbreak?
That I don't know. Maybe they can let us know. When we share this on social. But yeah, maybe it's the angst of all those heartbreaks and close win or close losses, coming to fruition in the form of jumping through like a burning table. Because those guys are crazy. Maybe it's the cold. Maybe it's so damn cold. Let's just jump through a burning plastic table, get warm.
Yeah, there's nothing like a fractured arm. And there's one of a guy, I love his form. He leaps through the air and falls through the table via like elbow drop. And it's very graceful. He has like a future in pro wrestling.
Yeah, he gave the table the people's elbow.
All right. Well, thank you, Khaled. Thank you all for listening to the top 5 What If moments in Buffalo Bills history. We'll be back next week with a new episode of another football team to celebrate the NFL postseason. Please subscribe. Please leave a review, share on social media. Shout out to Bill's Reddit for giving us a couple of suggestions. We appreciate it. And we'll see everyone real soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Rappers coming to my city, they gon' need consent. I already know you wouldn't need so we convinced. I told Virgil, right brick on my brick. The nicest with this shit ain't right this. I just spit white on shit my this ice drip on my fist. No shoe deal, but look at all this nice this shit I get. On Doe Street, it's white this shit I pitch. 2 in the morning on the corner, night shift with my blick. No soda.